Now, a new report has found Australian teachers are concerned about the evaluation process in the education system.
The Grattan Institute report says the majority of those surveyed believe teachers' evaluation process doesn't improve teaching in Australian schools. For more, the report's author, Dr. Ben Jensen, joins us now in the studio. Ben Jensen, good morning.
Good morning.
So, how many Australian teachers were you surveying, did you speak to?
This is the most comprehensive survey conducted of teachers across the world. So this was a survey that surveyed over 90,000 teachers across 23 countries. That represents over 2 million teachers across the world.
And how bad or how deep was the level of disaffection amongst the Australian teachers?
Well, I was surprised just how bad and how big the problems are. We have a situation where over 90% of Australian teachers are saying that if they improve the quality of their work or if they're more innovative in their teaching, they'll receive no recognition whatsoever. Teachers are telling us that their evaluation and their development is basically just a bureaucratic exercise which has no meaning and doesn't improve teaching within schools.
Do they believe they're doing a good job?
Teachers generally believe they are doing a good job.
So they rate themselves reasonably highly, do they?
Well, some teachers do and some teachers don't. And it's interesting that those teachers who say they have a greater impact on their students actually do receive more meaningful evaluation. They receive it more often. They receive it based on what they're doing in the classroom. Teachers who rate themselves more highly, who believe they're having the greatest impact on students, receive evaluation that focuses on what they're doing in the classroom.
How does the evaluation take place? Obviously, those doing the evaluations can't spend all day, every day inside the actual classroom. So how do they get to know just how the teacher's performing in front of the kids?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think they are getting to know how teachers are performing. What we have historically focused on in Australia and many other countries actually is upon teaching standards. And those standards are set centrally. And then what teachers are telling us is that the focus perhaps on standards means that it's becoming a bureaucratic ticker box exercise. So teachers are getting perhaps evaluated based on how they comply with standards that are detailed on a central form that is filled out by the school principal, rather than what they actually do in classrooms.
Any particular flair or skills they might have in engaging students to actually learn the standards?
Well, that's actually the problem, that when teachers are more innovative in schools, they're not recognised. We spend millions, each government across Australia spends millions on trying to increase innovation and quality within schools, when really what they should be doing is focusing on what teachers are doing, because they have a lot of the innovations themselves, and they're not harnessing that innovation or the quality teaching to spread throughout the education system.
From what you were saying earlier, though, because there's different kinds of evaluation that these teachers receive, does that vary from sector to sector? Is it a difference in evaluation, say, between the independent sector and the state schools?
There are some differences between independent schools and state schools. Unfortunately, in the data, we couldn't differentiate between Catholic and independent sectors, but this is a problem that exists across all sectors. When you have over 90% of teachers saying their evaluation is largely meaningless, when you have over 90% of Australian teachers saying the most effective teachers in their schools are not the ones that receive the most recognition, that's a problem that exists for all sectors of the Australian school education.
Well, we're reading, for example, this morning in Victorian newspapers about a pilot program where a bonus could be paid to those teachers who demonstrably improve their outcomes during a year. It's a matter, though, of how you actually measure that, isn't it?
Yeah, the system in Victoria, I think, is a good one. Any sort of reform we can get to this area, I think, is a positive move because the problems are that large. But yes, the system in Victoria focuses perhaps too much on student test scores, and we need to get some meaningful evaluation that focuses on what teachers do in the classroom, how they address each student's individual learning needs. And that's much broader than just focusing on test scores. It requires us to look at what teachers are doing in the classroom and how that impacts upon students.
Just as the report has found innovative teachers aren't being rewarded, it's also found that underperforming teachers aren't being adequately weeded out of the system.
Yeah, and that's obviously a clear problem. Teachers have the greatest impact upon students, and obviously less effective teachers have perhaps a negative impact on students, and unfortunately the research shows that lasts over time. And over 90% of Australian teachers are telling us that issues of underperformance and underperforming teachers are not addressed at all in their school.
So those teachers just remain?
Those teachers just remain, which is a problem obviously for students, but it's also very demoralising for the great majority of teachers that are effective.
How can underperforming teachers, looking, say, at the state system to start with, I mean, what is the mechanism to remove a teacher who isn't meeting standards?
Or indeed improve what they do?
Yeah, well, clearly at the moment we have a system that doesn't address this whatsoever. And the part of those issues are the process in place. So the focus on evaluation on standards rather than what they actually do in the classroom. So if it is just an administrative ticker box exercise, then clearly that's just how poor performing teachers just progress through the system. What we need is to focus much more on what they're doing, what their impact upon students is, and how that develops over time.
Well, the federal government presumably will love to hear this. This will be great news for them, because there's a strong sense that we're getting that the federal government would like to see the professionalising, more professionalising of the teacher sector, and also the ability to reward decent teachers and to weed out the ones that they consider not decent. So this kind of plays into their hands a bit, doesn't it?
I think it supports what they're doing in some of the aspects of their national partnership agreements that they have on quality teaching.
Well, was that the Grattan Institute's intention to support what their philosophy might be?
The intention of this support is clearly to make public what the views are of teachers and school principals, and I think that argues a case for substantial reform. And at the moment, we do not see that size or magnitude of reform in any aspect of government policy in Australia.
As a side, bonuses to one side, how much is it the issue of the base pay teachers get at the heart of this? Teaching is arguably one of the most important professions in our society in terms of educating generations of children. How should governments be looking at perhaps increasing overall pay scales to attract the best and the brightest into teaching?
Well, I think, and that's some of what governments are trying to do with some of the examples you gave earlier of what's happening in Victoria and also in New South Wales, and the federal government is playing a role in that. I think the issue of pay scales has to be addressed. If we want to reward effective teachers, if we want to recognise effective teachers, clearly we have to pay them more. I just have to find a way to pay for it, basically.
Well, then, on that score, when you speak about substantial reform, I assume that pay issue is one element of it. What else do you see that substantial reform that you argue is so needed, what form should it take?
Well, first of all, evaluation has to be meaningful, so it has to focus on what teachers are doing, how they're addressing each student's learning needs. Then evaluation has to have consequences, so it has to have consequences in terms of pay, it has to have consequences in terms of lots of other rewards and the recognition that teachers receive. Teachers go into the profession for many reasons other than just monetary. We know teachers aren't well paid overall, and we have to have mechanisms to address underperforming teachers. But most importantly, evaluation has to focus on the development and improving teachers in the classroom. We spend millions on professional development for teachers, but it's not targeted to their needs, and it's overall, I think it's ineffective spending.
Do you imagine that the Teachers Union is going to somehow see this report and its results as an attack on teachers and on the union too?
Well, I hope not, because this is what teachers are saying. Overall, the vast majority, when it's over 90% of teachers saying this problem is very substantial and there are problems of low quality teaching and issues in our school that that impact upon students, then hopefully the unions will take a more positive note. I will say that in other countries, when this report has been released, it's led to significant reform, policy and institutional reform, and a lot of that has been unions saying we have to totally re-evaluate our stance on teacher evaluation.
Ben Jensen, good to have you on the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.